Good afternoon, colleagues. I want to first announce that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing committee, and advisory committee meetings, as well as information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest, and then we'll move to the singing of the national anthem. Councillor Morgan?
Yes, I'll disclose a pecuniary interest on the item 2.1 of the Corporate Services Committee 17th report, as my employer is Western University. I'll also note that I won't be declaring a pecuniary interest as I have in at previous meetings on PEC item 3.8. I had previously done so, but in consultation with my employer, they no longer have any financial interest in that particular item, so I'm free to vote on it now.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Helmer?
Just on the same item, 2.1 for the Corporate Services Committee, although I have the same potential source of a conflict as Councillor Morgan, I'm employed by Western University as a teaching assistant. I don't believe on the matter of the pre-budget submission that there's actually a pecuniary interest activated there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on. There are no recognitions this evening, and so what I'll do is I'll ask all members of council, staff, attendees to please stand for the singing of the national anthem.
Mr. Mayor, I've been asked to lead us, so I would invite all to join.
Thank you for your courage.
Thank you. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, thou to north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Hubert. I want you to know that you will always be welcome to return to council chambers anytime after November 30th of this year to lead us or to lead council in the singing of the national anthem.
My parents would be very pleased that the money that they invested in music lessons has finally paid off.
And I'm not really sure about the financial gain, but you're still welcome.
It's a net loss.
Anyway, we'll look for any review of confidential matters to be considered in public. There are none. So we'll now move to council in closed session. For the reasons listed on the agenda, including the added, I understand there is one item we're going in camera for. I'll look to the clerk to see if there are any others. Nope. Okay. So we will be, I'll look for a motion to go into private session, moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Let's call the question. That should come up on screen in a moment. And we are voting.
Yes.
And Councillor Usher indicates he's voting manually yay.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-0.
Colleagues will meet in committee room 3. We'll be out no later than 5:15. I do not imagine that we will need that entire time. Those members watching on the YouTube channel, I think you can expect us out relatively soon. Thank you very much. We'll call the meeting back to order. And I think we have just sent a record following the usher principle that returned to public session no later than 5:15. It is 4:14. So thank you, Councillor Usher, again for your advocacy. You get the credit. Let's move our way through the agenda here. Confirmation and signing of the minutes of the previous meetings. That's the 16th meeting held on September 18th of 2018. Moved by Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. That'll come up on screen in a moment. And we are voting.
Councillor Turner? Councillor Usher?
Councillor Usher votes manually yay.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-0.
Okay, colleagues, let's move to communications and petitions. There are a number of communications related to the 230 North Center Road applicant, the application. I'll look for a motion to refer them to that appropriate clause. Moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any discussion? Okay, let's call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-0.
And we'll move to item 7, motions of which notice is given. There are none. So we'll now move to reports. The 13th report of the Civic Works Committee. We'll move to the chair, please.
In the chair's absence, I'll be happy to bring this forward. Councillor Ridley is en route and will be here by 5 o'clock, I hear. So I'm happy to put the whole report on the floor, save and except for item 23.3 on the blue agenda.
I'm sorry, that was 23, 4.3?
23.3.
23.3, thank you. Okay, and I have Councillor Armstrong. Did you want to pull an item or did you want to speak to an item? A question about an item that is in the bulk that we're passing? A question about an item that's in the bulk that we're passing, or did you want to pull one separately?
I guess pull 17.
17, okay. So if we could, then Councillor Park, we'll deal with 17 and 20 separately. Anything else? Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, I'd like to speak to, I don't want to pull anything, but just to speak to number 15 and number 22.
15 and 22, okay. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Hubert?
19.
You want to pull 19? Speak to 19, okay. Anything else? Okay. Councillor Cassidy?
Yes, I'd like to speak to 4, 20, and 22.
4, 20, and 22. So 20 is being pulled separately, so we'll hold off on that one, but we've got the other items. Anything else? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Park.
I just want to clarify that 17, I believe it was, has been pulled. That's something that Councillor Ridley had a conflict on. So I just want to be clear, so she had the opportunity when she comes back to declare it.
And if you could please remind us if she comes back in the room while we're dealing with this, that would be great. So let's deal then with all items that have been moved by Councillor Park. So that's the entire report with the exception of 17 and 20. And it's been moved by Councillor Park. I'll work my way through the speakers list then. Who would like to speak to item 4, clause 4? Councillor Cassidy. Morgan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was at the Civic Works Committee, and I just wanted to repeat to staff my thanks for continuing to move this forward. It's always been a major issue in Ward 5. It's a major intersection that a lot of residents use to get downtown. So I'm happy to see it continue to move forward, and I'm excited, not excited for the construction, but I'm excited for the end result. Thanks very much.
And Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I'll speak to the same one, as this borders Ward 7 as well. And I know it's not just Councillor Cassidy and I, but anybody who uses this intersection knows that it's not the smoothest one to navigate. And so this continuing to move forward to an ultimate conclusion is something that will benefit the entire north part of London. And I look forward to the completion of the 30-day review and the next steps in the future.
I'll speak to that from the chair, if that's okay. I'm feeling a little bit reminiscent. As the Ward 7 councillor, I remember working very closely with the Old Masonville neighborhood on all kinds of traffic issues that they were having in the neighborhood. We made some progress on the residential streets, but really the number one issue was this intersection. And to be able, we were able to move this up somewhat in the timelines based on their advocacy. And it's great to see this moving forward. This is a serious bottleneck in North London. And really, I think that hats off to the councillors for their advocacy and also to the neighborhood, particularly Old Masonville ratepayers for all the work that they've done moving up to this point. And let's move then to 15, if we could. Who wanted to speak to 15? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I just want to make a comment. I know the community is here this evening up in the gallery, and I want to just give my thanks to the committee and to staff and to the community and to Byron Southwood School and the Board of Education, because this truly was a neighborhood connectivity plan. It started off with just a couple sidewalks. We've really looked at that whole neighborhood and come up with some more sidewalks. I know it was extra work for staff, and I want to pass on my thanks to them and to the committee for really looking at the neighborhood and how it's going to work and function, and I hope that we will continue to do so in all our neighborhoods, in particular at Byron Southwood. And I'd also like to congratulate Byron Southwood on their 65th anniversary. I think they had celebrations this past weekend.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for your leadership on this as well over the course of the process. Thank you very much. Councillor Usher.
Mr. Chair, I wasn't sure of the numbers, so I can only go by 3.1 and 3.2, and I'd just like to address both of them. I believe Councillor Hubert wants to speak to one of them also. I saw his name there. But I just want to congratulate staff with respect to the environmental assessment for the proposed W12 landfill site. This is something that has been going on for a while, and we seem to be getting there closer and closer to what we need for that site that's in 3.1. And also in 3.2 with respect to the waste diversion action plan, that also we are getting there. We need to get to that 60%, and I just want to be sure that it gets there before I start raising daisies.
A long, long time from now, Councillor, I'm sure. Let's move then to 17. That's 2.12. Oh, I'm sorry, we pulled that. So let's move. So that was 3.1. Also, someone want to speak to 3.2. That was 19. Was that you, Deputy Mayor Hubert? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to rise and speak to this because I was thinking about how I could frame this in. It started out like this. Once upon a time, there was a city, and it was one of the largest cities in Ontario that did not have a green bin. Once upon a time, that same city had a goal of a 60% waste diversion target. They set a goal of 60. They initiated a green bin. They had aspirations for that. They conducted a number of mini steps along the way. They even surveyed the population. And the population told them once upon a time that they would support it and they'd even pay a little bit more for it. Mr. Mayor, once upon a time, that same city undertook a pilot project that was very successful. And then, alas, a group of 8 councillors voted to not proceed with the green bin. And unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, I want to prove that to council, because going through my files, I found a London Free Press article that says green bin gets a nod. And one councillor actually said, we haven't approved it yet. But that was the approval of some 8 years ago, Mr. Mayor. That was actually dated January 19th, 2010. So once upon a time, this city set a goal of 60%. We still have that goal. I want to congratulate staff who continue to keep the foot on the pedal and continue to put us forward. That's not a fairy tale. Our staff continue to do great work and continue to move the municipality towards that 60% goal. But we all recognize, Mr. Mayor, that it's going to take a substantive change to get there. And hopefully that will not be in a fairy tale land, but it'll actually be in the City of London. So I wanted to share that perspective from a historical perspective. I look forward to that reality sometime while I still have hair.
I resemble that remark. Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Hubert. Let's move to Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also wanted to talk about the green bin program. Of course, the devil's in the details, and we really got to watch the way that we turn this out. At the meeting, we were told that there's about 60% uptake of a green bin program, and what that means is that 40% of the 180,000 green bins which we purchase for $50 to $70 are essentially wasted. So that's about $4 million that we're wasting off the hop. So this is not a plan that I would like to see come back to council. What I'd prefer to see, since not everybody's going to be using it anyway, is that we go with an opt-in green bin program. And if the people willing to pay for this do, I think that we'll be able to have a system that will allow people to have their green bins picked up once a week on the same day. We can start with $150 for 10% opt-in. That should cover it. And if there's more people that want to be involved, then that price would go down. And I think that's the way for us to cover a green bin program, especially when you consider that people are writing in and saying to us that they're on fixed incomes and they can't afford and don't want to participate in this. So for us to force them to waste this much money is I think, very poor policy. So that's the plan I would like to see come back, or at least as an option. So we should look at something like that as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, I just want some clarification here. This is being moved with the bulk of the report, and you've just spoken against it. Would you like me to pull that so you can vote against it?
I think staff is still coming back to us. We can go through to you with the plans, and that could be something that would be a part of it, and that was my request.
Fair enough.
That we see another
just looking
option.
for clarification there, so we'll continue that. We'll keep that in with the bulk of the report. Councillor Turner, imagine.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I was not going to speak to this actually until my learned colleague on the other side of the horseshoe spoke. We don't opt in and opt out of services. We don't opt in out of fire services or opt into police services. We provide services to the City of London, and we provide those services, and we should provide them universally. So to raise that point, I have a lot of concerns with that. In fact, I don't think we're going far enough. And I raised that point before to say that 60% diversion was where we should have been 10 years ago. But this is where we're going to be in a couple of years instead, or a few years. I really think as we take a look at other municipalities, we take a look at the technology, we take a look at those opportunities to increase the capture rate from recyclables and from other areas and sectors such as industrial, institutional, and commercial, as well as multi-unit residential. Those are our opportunities to get much further than 60%. So I think right now this is bare minimum for me. And I'm very happy to see us move forward. I'm not quite at the point of patting ourselves on the back yet, because 3 years ago, a majority of us voted against moving forward with green bins. So nonetheless, I am happy to see some forward movement, and I think this is exactly what we need to do, and I think this will, one, it shows environmental responsibility, it shows economic responsibility. We've figured out a way to move forward and do it in an economically feasible way. We've spent the time to take a look and ask the community what they want and what they would support. And I think a lot of us are hearing on the doorsteps right now that there's a lot of support for this within the community, and the question is, what's taking so long? So let's keep moving forward. I'm looking forward to seeing these on the doorsteps.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'll go to Councillor Usher, and also remind all colleagues that although we are in an election cycle, let's be careful about what we talk about in this chamber as we do business on behalf of the city, and what happens when we may be outside of this chamber. Some of us are campaigning. Councillor Park. Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have a little concern, and that is with respect to the information that Councillor Van Holst talked about. It seems to me that it's contrary to what was presented, and I don't want to leave here with anyone thinking that Councillor Van Holst's comments, that the staff has to live by that. I'd much prefer for this to be pulled. You make a correction to this or an amendment, and then we vote on this, because this is putting staff in a real precarious situation.
That's fine, Councillor Usher. What I'll do is I'll pull it. Each individual member of council has the opportunity to vote yay or nay, but I'll pull it based on your request. Thank you. Other speakers? Okay, there are none. Let's then move to, I believe, item was 20, no, it was 22, 4.2 traffic signalization at priority intersections was pulled. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, I'm going to be sending my thanks to the committee and to staff for supporting this letter of request from Councillor Cassidy and I to have a look at detailed design work at some of our intersections in our wards. We both have wards that are all about development, and especially in Ward 9, it's going to be even more so in the congestion and how we move around and how we do our traffic signaling light may be a question to see if we can do it a better way. So we've asked staff to come back with a review looking at best practices in other municipalities. I think it's time that we maybe have a look at it. And just want to thank the committee again for allowing the initial designs to take place on the intersections and in at a location in Ward 9 to start looking at the surveys and starting them now to see if we can get traffic lights sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship, and just to add to what Councillor Hopkins said, my thanks again to staff for helping us on this and helping us come up with an approach to take to make sure that we are capturing the priority intersections that we know are going to need or are already there. And in fact, Ms. Scher did tell us that 2 of the intersections on our list had actually progressed on their own by between the time that we had crafted the letter to the time that it was presented to committee. So we knew that these were priority intersections, and that bears that out. I also want to just mention that what gets the attention in Ward 5 as far as development goes are the one-off infill developments that take place that cause a lot of community engagement, but there is a lot of new greenfield development still taking place because Ward 5 is right up there on the county line along Sunningdale Road. There's still a lot of new subdivisions going in there, and so some of these intersections are in those areas where population is increasing, and it's doing so at a rapid rate. So thanks again to staff, and thanks to the committee for supporting us.
Okay, I have no additional speakers, and so I'll turn things over to Councillor Park to wrap up. This is everything in the report with the exception, I believe, of 17, 19, and 20. So that is 2.12, 3.2, and 3.3.
Great, thank you very much. I just wanted to wrap up on item 2.7, the downtown King Street cycling improvements. Wanted to take the opportunity to thank not only the business community, the cycling community, but also staff that have come together on this. There was a robust conversation that was held at the downtown London office about what the impacts of improvements would be on the business community, and I can say that there was a very positive conversation about how we could all move this forward together. So I think a lot of work has been done in terms of that, and I look forward to seeing more progress on that in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Park. So, colleagues, everything with the exception of 17, 19, and 20 has been moved by Councillor Park. If there's no further interest in speaking, I'll call the question. And we're voting.
I thought you said you were going to pull 3.2.
Oh,
Okay, good. Thank you. That's what I thought too, but the chair said no, so.
We're dealing with, Counselor, with everything but 2.12, 3.2, and 3.3.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 14-0.
And with that, I can put 17.2.12 on the floor, business case for switching to compressed natural gas waste collection vehicles.
Did someone pull that? I can't recall. Counselor Armstrong?
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, just through you to staff and so the public can better understand this. Many years ago, the LTC introduced natural gas buses. And there was some issues, as I recall, and I'm not really sure. My understanding was that back then, the weight of these buses, the tanks that they had to carry to accommodate running on natural gas were very heavy. And those buses, it led to additional maintenance costs. And so I just want perhaps for staff just to alleviate any concerns that this isn't going to be, I think it's deja vu, that we're going to end up with the same situation, that we're getting into natural gas, that the vehicles are going to have higher maintenance costs because of the weight. Like what's changed from the experience the LTC, which they abandoned, to today and what's going on here, just so that the public can hear it right from our staff.
Mr. Stanford.
Through you, Your Worship. We had a chance to speak with LTC on the issues in the past, and yes, there were concerns, and that was 15 to 20 years ago. What has basically happened, though, with technology is things do improve. We have looked at the marketplace and chatted with our colleagues in other municipalities. Right now, compressed natural gas vehicles operate in about 20 communities in Ontario, including very large ones, Toronto, Mississauga, Brampton, Ottawa, for example. Over 350 of these trucks are now in operation, have been for several years. So we are very comfortable now with the technology that is in place. We've spoken with others who have been involved in truck maintenance. The things from the past, yes, very legitimate at the time, and that's all part of the learning curve. We're well past the learning curve, and this happens to be a direction that now is very popular throughout North America. And with the experience in Ontario, we now have cold weather climate activities as well.
The other thing I wondered, because we just talked about that not too long ago, was the potential introduction of the opportunity to go to electric rather than natural gas. I just want to understand, at the time, staff was looking at this, we hadn't discussed about the potential for the city going to electric buses. And therefore, everybody remembers the discussion, there may be other opportunities. So that didn't come into play earlier. Can we understand now that later on, we're not going to find that perhaps we're following through on this, and yet electric may be the thing that we might want to pursue in the future, and now we're stuck with a natural gas fleet. So if I just want to know that staff has looked at that opportunity as well and done the comparators.
Through your worship, we did look at electric garbage trucks. And I think probably the best comparison would be to think back to compressed natural gas with buses 15 to 20 years ago. There are one or two communities right now with initial garbage trucks that are in the electrification mode right now. But it is a brand new technology for garbage trucks. It is something that has very little evidence of success at this point in time. But it is something, though, like anything, over the next 20 years for garbage trucks, yes, they might make greater inroads. No different than what has happened with compressed natural gas. Our movement to compressed natural gas is being done in a cycle of about 8 years. So if, in fact, something changes, and this is where we will watch the marketplace very closely, We are not being locked into building our own fueling station, which is one of the great advantages of the proposal that is before us, working with Union Gas. We will be using their fast fill location. So the ability to change in 8 years will be at the call of council. A garbage packer that is electrified is completely different than a bus that is electrified. They can provide completely different services, and the marketplace is at different points in their evolution at this point in time.
And finally, Your Worship, just, I had looked at this a while ago, and I just want to be assured from our staff that the technology is safe, because I do remember seeing things on the internet where some of these vehicles had caught on fire, so I just want an assurance that there won't be any issues, that these are in fact safe vehicles.
Mr. Stanford, is the technology safe?
Through your worship, everything that we've uncovered suggests that this is safe. There are many safeguards in this industry, as there are with many fleet, that suggest that this is as safe as they come. Yes, you can go on YouTube right now and find incidents, I think, with any type of technology out there. But as far as anything we've uncovered and the conversations we've had with people who have this in place, we have complete comfort in moving forward.
Thank you. I have no further speakers on 17. That's clause 2.12. Let's call the question. Moved by Councillor Park. We're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 14-0.
And item number 19, 3.2, I'll put on the floor so Councillor Van Holst can have his opportunity to vote against it. 60% waste diversion action plan.
Thank you. Pulled by Councillor Usher. Any speakers? There are none. Let's call the question. Oh, Councillor Usher, go ahead. Actually, Councillor Usher, technically you've already spoken to this, and then you asked for it to be pulled. I'm going to allow it. It's just I just want to point that out.
I just want to give, my concern here is that I want to give Councillor Van Holst an opportunity to address this, and if he wants to add an amendment, to do so, because my impression is that he has left staff with the feeling that staff must look after something that he said, and we don't do that. It has to be council, and this sounds like a major alternative that he's talking about. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay, thank you. And it's been pulled. Any other speakers? There are none, so let's call the question. Moved by Councillor Park. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-1.
And I can put on the floor 3.3, item 20 on the council agenda, renaming of Pleasant View Ave. Colleagues will note that there was an amendment sheet. It's an administrative amendment on this from committee to council.
Any speakers? Councillor Cassidy, anyone else?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to again repeat my comments from the committee meeting to staff with many thanks on behalf of the community. Many thanks to the committee for recommending that council take no action, but thanks to staff for providing that option. After hearing from the community, there was a staff recommendation, but staff provided 3 options to committee to consider, and one of them was just to leave it as it is. It's been there for about 15 years, and we have a lot of other streets in the city that don't connect, and yet they have the same name. The community is really happy, pleased with the committee recommendation, and I'm very hopeful that council will support the committee recommendation.
Okay, there is an administrative amendment that is on our desks as well, and so I'll look to Councillor Usher, who just indicated he's seconding that amendment, so we'll deal with the amendment and then the main motion as amended. Any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question on the amendment only.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 14-0.
And the main motion is amended, moved by Councillor Park. Any speakers? There are none. Seconded by Councillor Usher. And we are voting.
Councillor Slee. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-0.
And thank you, Councillor Park. Let's move to the 15th report of the Planning and Environment Committee. We'll move to the chair, Councillor Turner.
Good evening, Your Worship. I present the Planning and Environment Committee report from last week. I believe there was 2 items of non-unanimous consent, which was 13 and 16, or items 3.5 and 3.8. So I imagine those would be pulled. I'm not sure if there are others. Anybody from council would wish removed.
Any others? That's 13, that's 3.5, or 16, 3.8. There are none.
I'm informed 13 doesn't need to be pulled.
I'm sorry,
I am informed that number 13 does not need to be pulled.
does not need to be pulled. Okay, so we'll do the entire report with the exception then, Chair, of 16, 3.8. Any speakers? Councillor Helmer.
Just briefly on a couple of matters. 7, which is also 2.6, is the expansion of the Old East Village community improvement area, the business improvement area, to match essentially the community improvement area. And this has been a long time coming. I know that the BIA has been working up and down the corridor for many, many years. Councillor Hubert, Deputy Member Hubert, will remember that from his time when he was on the board of the BIA. And this is really aligning the boundaries of the BIA with the area that they're working in all the time. And I'm glad to see there are only a handful of objections to the expansion, and nowhere near the threshold to stop it from happening. And I think it's going to provide the BIA with the kind of own source revenue that they need to do the important work that they're doing in the community. I want to say congratulations to Jen Pastorius and the board of the BIA for getting to this point. I'm looking forward to see what they do in the future. On 14, which is also 3.6, this is 723 Lorne Avenue. This is one of many steps along the way of trying to make the best of a bad situation with the closure of the school. And this is the rezoning for the lands to make sure that about half the site is going to be for a new park. And the remainder of the site will be for low-rise residential, essentially single-family detached housing that will fit into the Heritage Conservation District. And I think that's a really good step forward. Not everybody is in support of that in the community. Some people are very concerned about how big the part will be for housing and how the street will get connected through to Queens Ave along the new Queens Place. But I think that it's a good sign that there was not a lot of people in the gallery. People are generally very supportive of the new park in particular. On item number 15, this is the rezoning for 900 King Street and 925 Dundas. This is obviously the rezoning to allow for a specific use for a casino. I think it's really important that we have that definition in the zoning bylaw and that it be applied to these lands. I think specifically articulating what the uses are is important for this site. In the past, it was defined by basically whatever the Western Fair would like to do on the site, and I think that was not the right way to approach the zoning. I think this is much better, and I want to reassure people that Queen's Park in particular remains a city park, and there's no impact on Queen's Park.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very thrilled at the committee for passing the business improvement area for Hamilton Road, and I'd like to congratulate the Business Association because they've been working for 10 years towards this. It's pretty exciting what's been done by this council. We've essentially given them every tool to revitalize this area: community improvement plan, streetscape master plan, the grants for the facade improvements, and now a BIA. That's it's a wonderful help, and we are really doing a lot for the East End in this. So I think very exciting things to come along this corridor. Thank you.
We spoke about it at committee as well, but thank you both to Councillor Helmer and Councillor Van Holst for your leadership on these items as well. Big steps forward. Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you. I wanted to speak to those same two issues because I think sometimes we forget the value of our BIAs, and I certainly want to extend my congratulations to Councillor Van Holst for birthing, if you will, out there a new BIA, and Councillor Morgan had that wonderful experience earlier in this term of council with the Hyde Park BIA and the expansion of the Old East Village BIA, and obviously our downtown BIA is very active with the issues downtown. What people don't realize is this is part of our small business development strategy. The people that are for the most part of BIAs are actually small, local businesses here in London, and anything that we can do to grow them is a positive thing. We don't actually grow the business. We help create the conditions that grow the business. And certainly last term of council, I had the opportunity to serve on the BIA board out in the Old East Village, and it was a delightful experience, and the commitment of people to their community, business owners to their community, is something that is exceptional. So congratulations to these two BIAs, but certainly to all four of our BIAs, and may they multiply. May we have another one at some point next term.
Thank you. Other speakers? Okay, let's call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-0.
Your Worship, I put number 16 on the floor, which is with respect to an application at 230 North Centre Road. The committee motion was for a referral back to report back by end of month. Actually, it allowed for a couple more weeks, but with the intent to come back by the end of month to provide some more community consultation.
Thank you. Any speakers? Okay. Mr. Zafman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted a quick question through you to our planning staff. You know, part of the reasoning for this referral back was for potential revisions to this application. And in my reading of the majority of the concerns with this application, there was a lot of citing that high density is not appropriate in their opinion for this site. And staff's opinion was that we should allow for this, and that was their recommendation. I'm curious if there was a revision to be made, would staff consider removing high density as a recommendation, or would it stay?
Well, Your Worship, I think we want to have a conversation with the community within the context of fish plan policies, and based on the work that's been done to date. I would say that as a staff, our recommendation has been for higher intensity forms of development, but I would like to leave that understanding of to what degree and what form it might take to the meeting that we're going to have with the community rather than presuppose where we end up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask that question. I think it's just helpful in informing how I will vote on this, and I'm going to vote against the referral, and in part because from all the comments that I've seen and from hearing from staff, this site makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, for high density usage. I don't think that's what a number of members of our community want to see, but I think it makes a lot of sense for this site. And frankly, as much as the importance of communicating this and having more discussions with our community and having their feedback on this, I'm not sure what number height for a tower is going to be acceptable. It's gone from 22 to 18. It could go lower, but frankly, I'm just not really that convinced that it's going to change significantly the opinion of a majority of the members of the community. And frankly, I think it's just putting off an appeal by members of the community whenever this does eventually get hopefully approved. So I think frankly, we're just stalling a bit here, and it just seems a bit redundant and not so useful to me.
Thank you, Councillor Zafman. Other speakers? Councillor Van Holst.
Question through you to staff. Were Are there any affordable housing units being included in this? Just,
Let's go to the chair first, and then we'll go to the city planner.
Thank you, through your worship, to the member. No.
Thank you.
Shortest answer ever. Thank you very much. Other speakers? Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the community because some questions were raised about their willingness to compromise. I think what the community really is hoping for is a conversation. So there hasn't really been a sit-down conversation of give and take going back and forth with the staff and the developer or the applicant and the community. So I know what the community has said in public meetings. I also know what representatives of the community have said in private conversations, which have included staff in some of those conversations. They have shown a willingness to compromise here, and they have shown a willingness to come up in height, despite what the current zoning is, which is medium density, which would currently allow six stories. So they have shown a willingness to compromise. They just really would like to have an actual conversation, and through you, Your Worship, I want to thank staff for doing the work immediately following the Planning Committee meeting to arrange for that conversation to take place, and looking forward to something good to come out of those conversations.
Thank you. Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my question through you to staff, if they can tell me. Can you tell me the process that was followed up to this point in time, up to when this came to committee? Because I was of the impression that there was discussion with staff, but apparently what I gathered at the time was that there was no specific meeting. So I need a little bit more explanation on that.
So I'm going to look to the chair first,
yeah.
and then I'll turn to Mr. Fleming.
Through your worship, thank you to the councillor. The process had involved several community meetings, but at the point that it came for notification to council and to the committee, a motion had been made that requested that staff and the community and the developer continued to have community consultation. Consultation had occurred up to that point between the Planning Environment Committee, where it was first heard, to the committee meeting that it came. There was no formal organized meeting that had occurred, which was the impetus for the referral back to ensure that that meeting did occur.
So what I'm hearing was that there was no coordinated meeting where the public was able to come and look at the different proposals and staff respond to those questions. That's what I'm trying to get.
We'll get you a little bit more background. And Mr. Fleming, if you could just take us through that, the chronology, including the direction that you received from council in July and what was discussed at committee this past week.
Your Worship, I'll be brief and I can fill in any gaps that are requested, but I do want to make the point that there has been a lot of public consultation on this particular file, and I think that's clear. The question is, after the last public meeting, whether the expectations of council were met, and that's something that certainly we're glad to address, but and we're also going forward with another meeting that's coming up prior to a return on October 29th, I believe it is. But in terms of the process, there was a community meeting as being described by Councillor Usher, March 21st, 2018, which Tricar led, staff was there. The community came out to take a look at their proposal. Staff met with the ward councillor. I'm going off of the presentation that was given at committee. Additional meetings went on with Tricar to see how we could adjust the form, adjust the height. Potential design changes were submitted to staff in June. Tricar hadn't formally amended their application at that time. There was another community meeting held just before the planning committee meeting, and that was on July 3rd. And this is another one where Tricar was leading it, the staff were there, and we had the opportunity to hear the community. That was not addressed in the July planning committee report. As you know, there's a little bit of a delay between the time of the preparation of the reports and the time of the meeting at Planning Committee. So that's why that TRICAR meeting was not addressed, that second community meeting. We then had the July 16th public meeting here, so the community had another opportunity to provide their feedback. And TRICAR said that they were considering another alternative design and lowering the height from 22 to 18 stories. We had the direction from council at that time to continue to work with the applicant and the community move towards a design that would result in reduced shadow or overlook and reduced massing, etc. So we took the community feedback that we had heard at that planning committee meeting itself, the discussion at the July 16th TRICAR meeting, and we met with TRICAR to talk about design changes. TRICAR again met with Western in late July and made some massing changes again together with us in a conversation to move some of the massing from the east side of the building to the west side of the building. Let me see here. Final design changes were made based on community feedback, comments from staff, the peer review panel, and the final design was submitted to us at the city on August 15th. So you can see that there was an extensive amount of engagement relating to this. In fact, I'd say more than most applications. However, fair enough, we didn't interpret the July direction to have another community meeting specifically. It was to work with the applicant based on a lot of the feedback that we had received to date from the community, as well as at that public meeting before planning committee to incorporate it into revised design. At the planning committee just recently, we reached out to the applicant on the floor. He indicated that he would withhold any kind of appeal based on inaction in favor of one more community meeting. And as the ward councillors indicated, we've already begun to prepare for that.
I'm sorry. Sorry, just if I may, as a point of clarity, I don't think the committee believes that there was anything that was missed. It was a question of interpretation and perhaps our direction being a little ambiguous. So the direction from the committee was such that to try and clear up that ambiguity and seek further information.
Great, thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-2.
Thank you, Chair. 17th report, please, of the Corporate Services Committee. We'll go to the Chair for that report, Councillor Helmer.
I will put everything except for 5, which is also 2.1 on the floor. That's the only one I'm aware of where there's a pecuniary interest that's activated for Councillor Morgan. And I'll just look to see if there's anything else that anyone would like pulled.
Anything else? Just before we... Okay. Anything else pulled? Okay, Councillor Morgan, the bulk of the report is being moved with the exception of 5, 2.1, and Councillor Morgan wants to talk about 2.3.
Thank you. In 2.3, which is the mid-year capital budget monitoring report, this is where it outlines some of the emerging issues on the capital budget, and one of those included is the tariffs on steel and aluminum, which, despite the fact that a potential deal has been negotiated on a Canada-Mexico-U.S. Trade agreement, the tariffs on steel and aluminum and therefore the retaliatory tariffs likely remain. And the impacts over the course of our next planned budgets is about $10 million. I know I spoke at the meeting about the FCM at its most recent board meeting in September, having some concerns about this, particularly the impacts on municipal procurement, because many of us are buying bridges and buses and things that consume steel and aluminum. So I know we need to continue our advocacy and support on this side of things, and I want to ensure that despite the fact that there's a deal in place, that we will continue to do that. I do want to note that in about 18 minutes ago, the FCM came out with a statement on the USMCA, about reviewing the agreement, listening to the members to ensure that the procurement and dispute resolution mechanisms are going to be fair and equitable for municipalities, and that the government makes sure that it compensates municipalities who may be impacted by both the provisions of the new agreement as well as potential retaliatory tariffs. And so I just want to make sure that our staff have the mandate to continue their work on this. I believe they do. And if they need to comment, I would welcome them to. But again, this is a very important impact on the capital budget moving forward that I think we need to work very hard with our federal partners to mitigate. I don't know if staff can comment to make sure that they still have all the directions that they need from council to continue to advocate for us on this particular part of the file.
And just before we move forward, I'm going to go to Councillor Salee, who's looking to declare a pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies to my colleague. I just have a pecuniary interest on this as I work for the federal government, and this legislation impacts my work.
So start with the chair, then let's call this separately as well. Okay. Ms. Barbone, any comments?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So absolutely. So when we put the emergent issue, we've been following this very carefully, and it is something that we did look at a worst case scenario. So there still are some market, we'll see how the market reacts over time, and hopefully those tariffs will be renegotiated and things might change. But certainly we do have a mandate. We don't need any further direction to continue advocating on behalf of the impact on the municipalities and the purchasing and procurement that we would certainly like to see down. So through Rosanna and Ms. Wilcox's team, they will certainly continue to advocate at every opportunity that we have for reduced and compensation if that so is available.
Okay, so Chair, if I start with you, we'll move everything with the exception of 2 and 5, 2.1 and 2.3. Any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question. Mr. Helmer?
Just want to point out in the actual resolution there, it says 2 and then 2.1. 2.1 is twice. It should be 2.3 and 2.1. Very small thing.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Okay, I'll put item 2.3 on the floor. This is the one that Councillor Morgan just spoke about and Councillor Salee declared a pecuniary interest on.
Any other speakers? Okay, let's call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14 with 1 recused.
Okay, I'll put item 5, 2.1, City of London 2019 provincial and federal budget submissions on the floor.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to speak to this item for a bit, especially the part about the BRT, which I discussed at committee. First thing I'd like to do is ask through you to our chair or to staff if there's a deadline for these submissions.
Without being cheeky, I'd say before the budget and before the pre-budget hearings. I believe they're starting soon.
Oh, thank you. Do you have that date?
You might want to get. I see Ms. Wilcox wanted to stand up.
Thank you. Through your worship, typically we don't have the exact dates yet, but these typically take place in late October and into November.
Thank you, that's helpful. So, Your Worship, if staff were to put together a page of words that would intended to sell the BRT to the province and the federal government, they've certainly done a good job of that. At the meeting, I went through the points. I don't actually agree with them. I'm not going to go over that again. I just wanted to address one of the assertions that was made is that this is the right project at the right time. And I don't think that's the case in light of the new technologies that are coming up. I think any savvy board of directors, when making a decision on a $500 million technology, would also be looking ahead to see what's coming down the pipe. Here's some news from this week. In Edmonton, people on the 9th of October are going to be able to get into a 12-person driverless shuttle and see what their feelings about that are. So we're once again seeing those automated technologies happening right before our eyes. So that's a complete game changer for transit. Also in Belleville, they've got a bus hailing app. So they're going to be testing out in the evenings a new application where they've got a bus route, and they'll have one bus that travels around the route and another bus that you can actually hail, and it'll come directly to you and take you directly where you want to go on that route. And if somebody else calls, they will pick them up on the way. So these are the kinds of things we're seeing and should really look for.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to ask you if you could just draw your comments back to the matter that's before us.
Okay, so so my
provincial
point
and
was,
federal
is
budget
it the
submissions.
right time, right? We're saying that this is the right project, the right time. I think 20 years ago, this would definitely have been the right project at the right time. But at this point, we want to be looking at those things because that's what the future is, and I think the future for London. Thanks.
Councillor, I think all I can say is we've pulled it. You can vote against it. The budget submission reflects the direction of council. The majority of council identified this as the single most important project to move forward with. The staff report reflects those comments, and that's why it's before us. So staff haven't come up with this. This is a function of council direction. So you're entitled to vote against it. It's been pulled. Any other speakers? Okay. Let's call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 11-3 with one recuse.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let's then move to the added reports. This is 9.1, the 17th report of council in closed session. Any volunteers to move this? Councillor Asher. Can you report progress, please?
I just want to look at it. I'm not going to read it.
Okay, that's good.
I wasn't going to read it. I was just going to look at.
You had us all scared for a moment.
Progress. I wanted to make sure that it still stands. Anyway, I'll report progress on the.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
On the in-camera decisions that we made.
The 17th report of council in closed session. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, there are no speakers, so I'll call the question. We're voting. You're uppity.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Okay, deferred matters. There are none. Enquiries. Councillor Squire.
No one should be surprised that I wish to make an inquiry today. This past weekend, Ward 6 was the host to an unauthorized event that's now been called FOCO, Fake Homecoming. And I do not stand here today to condemn anyone, but to ask an inquiry of the city manager based on the report we received just a few minutes ago at 4 o'clock from the chief of police, where he said that the cost of policing in terms of this event alone is expected to be more than $100,000. And at certain points in time, there were 20,000 people on a small street in North London. He's calling this a public safety risk. And I've been doing this for 4 years, and I'm going to do it again. I would like to know, because I have not been privy to any discussions pre or post this event, I want to be able to tell my constituents, and perhaps the city manager can help me, where do we go from here? Because I've heard from Western, certainly pre-event and post-event, that they no longer consider this event to be the responsibility of Western University, given where it is and that it is not sanctioned by them. Chief Perry is indicating in his report that we need something other than just police action. So all I'm looking for, and I'm not apportioning any blame at all to city staff at all. I was there with them and city staff was there. I want to commend our police service for the restraint they showed. But I want to know from the city manager, is there a way forward? Or is the Ward 6 councillor, whoever they may be, going to be standing here year after year and asking about this event? Because spending $100,000 of taxpayer money on an event is staggering.
Through your worship, well, one of the things I will do is discuss the issue with Western. I have a list of items that I want to go over with them, and that will certainly be one that I will add because they're part of the community as well. It's a difficult issue. I believe it's one that's faced in other jurisdictions. I know we faced it even with Fanshawe College a number of years ago, and I believe the college acted and the student union in the college acted to help us get through that, although it's something that can resurface again and again. While I have no immediate solutions, obviously, it's certainly something that I can discuss with my colleagues and members of the community over the next little while and maybe come back with some suggestions that we can bring to council. One thing I will say is it's likely going to cost money, whatever we do, and so I'll just put you on notice on that. But I don't believe there's nothing we can do. I believe there is something we can probably do. It may not be as effective as we would like, but certainly we'll discuss it over the next little while.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Hayward, and thank you to your staff. Thank you to Mr. Katolik and his staff. Thank you to Chief Perry and his officers who were there on Saturday doing their best. Thanks to the York Region police officers who were there doing their best, and everyone who's involved, the fire department, ambulance workers, who put public safety at the forefront. They were there for public safety, and I want to commend them on that.
Thank you. Any other, it's an inquiry, so we'll deal with it separately, but I'll go to you next. And we'll consider this a separate inquiry, so if you could ask a question, please.
Okay, so my question then would be, because I was there as well and joined Councillor Squire for a tour, and I could see the challenges that we're facing. You know, I'm on the London Police Service Board as well, so, you know, we're going to come back to you, I guess, for more money then, if that's the reality. So I guess, would it be appropriate at this stage if Councillor Squire wanted to, I know the city manager is going to do that, but could we formalize that? Is that an option to have staff report back? I just think that might be, I don't know, but I just wanted to do that and give the councillor an opportunity because I'd be happy to second it, but I just wanted to ask.
No, I certainly appreciate the comment, and obviously this is an issue that's important to the ward council, it's important to all of council. The councillor has the option of bringing forward an emergent motion, but because we are 363 days away from the next event, it's probably worth bringing that through committee instead. Probably doesn't qualify as an emergent motion because there's no urgency at this time. Any other speakers? I'll just say from the chair, thanks to Councillor Salee and Councillor Squire, others who've been so supportive during this. I know that the situation's getting worse, not better, and I think we can all look to what happens in the areas in and around Fanshawe College, in Ward 3, and the incredible work that Peter Devlin does, the president of Fanshawe College, and his team, and being proactive. And I understand that at times even President Devlin goes door to door and speaks directly with students about behavior, even though that behavior is occurring off of that campus. So lots of work to be done, I think, and we've heard from Mr. Hayward that that's on his radar. Thank you. Other emergent motions? Okay, there are none. Let's then move to, I'm sorry, that was inquiries. Let's move to emergent motions. There are none. Bylaws. I don't believe any have to be pulled separately. So we'll look for a mover for the bylaws. Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. This is first reading.
Councillor Salim? Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
And second reading, moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by, thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Any speakers?
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, third reading, moved by Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Thank you. Let's call the question.
Councillor Huber? Councillor Huber?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, that's a wrap. I think we may have just set a record for the 2014 to 2018 council term. Look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much, Councillor Ridley, seconded by Councillor Usher. All those in favor? We are adjourned. See you all next week.